Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday morning. Thank you all for joining me. Let's see, we got Bulgaria, Bulgaria in the chat, Germany in the chat, and I forget where Lush is. I think you're in Massachusetts somewhere, Connecticut. I can't remember. We have an international audience already this morning. Welcome. Turfgrass Epistemology. I'm Travis Shaddix. We're on a journey to find out how we know what we know about turfgrass science. And we have been talking about Thatch the last day or two. We have a brief little article we're going to go over today. And we have a brief little a periodical, like a website article too, we're going to go over today. I just happened to come across it this morning. I thought I'd bring it up. So it's going to be hopefully a relatively short episode today. I've got I don't know how many people in my house right now, but I said I would try to keep it down, and I'll try to get this knocked out. I have a gas company turning off my gas, running gas lines. My wife's in the house. She's got to go to work. She's taking some friends to the airport. So all sorts of stuff going on. I almost canceled, actually, but I think I can get it done, and then it may just be short. But welcome you all. Thank you for joining me. Let's talk about the article real quick, and then I'll get into the Thatch paper. The article, I came across an article that was I don't know, about robotics, and it's on Lawn and Landscape. It was posted 2 days ago, November 10th. It was posted 2023. It's called Gray's Robotics Launches Pre-Orders. I'm in no way associated with that company. I have no idea if their products are good or bad. No clue. So I'm not promoting them, and I'm not promoting them. I'm just talking about this particular article. And it talks about pre-orders. They're trying to sell their products and everything else. And on the website, they show a robotic mower that looks like more like a 3-gang mower. It's probably a 3-gang, not a 3-gang, like a 3-blade mower with well, it doesn't look like a normal robotic mower. It almost looks like a tractor with a 3-blade, part in the front that drops down and goes around. The tires are the non-pneumatic, the run tires that you can't puncture them or anything. So it'll probably run for God knows how long without having to change those tires. But anyway, the reason I'm mentioning it is because this particular mower is one that is robotic, runs on batteries, but it's really made for more like large areas. And the main problem that I as you probably know, if you don't know, I'll let you know, is that I have a robotic mower on my lawn. I've been doing robotic mowers for several years. I've been doing research with robotic mowers. I've published a few abstracts about robotic mowers with my grad students and so forth when I was at UK. And whether you're a fan of robotic mowers or not, they're coming, okay? They're coming, and they'll eventually work out all the kinks, and it's going to be a part of our normal maintenance programs and our normal management practices, whether you like it or not. There's some problems with the early models. They've worked out some of those kinks. There's still going to be problems with these models, and it'll evolve, and they'll eventually work it all out. But one of the major problems that I've ran into over the years is that the small units, even the commercial grade small units that are meant for like a lawn, you can only do about an acre and a half at the most. Because from what I understand, it's the power that runs through the wire can only go so far. So it can actually mow probably much more area, but apparently it can only maintain a signal for a certain length of wire. And that's around an acre and a half. I don't know if that's true. That's what I was told. Anyway, I kept one out on the research center here, and it was gorgeous. I ran it on an acre, and it was fantastic. I had 14 units going on at one time, various different projects going on, and the plots looked great. It actually maintained color far into the fall and winter greater than on a regular mower, which shocked me. I never really could figure that out, but I think it's because the blade on those robotic mowers, if it's using a razor blade, makes such a sharp cut compared to a rotary mower with a dull blade. It just keeps it nice and healthy, I guess. I don't know, but I have aero photographs I can show you where the robotic squares in December and January are just green, and the normal rotary mowers are dormant looking. So there's value to these robotic mowers, and they're coming. And it's either one of these things where you get on the bus or get left behind sort of thing. But one of the major problems I ran into is it just can't go much more than an acre. Okay, there's just not a lot of. I mean, if you're going to be mowing a football field or many fairways or whatever, you're going to have many units, and which is not a huge issue. You could do that, but it's a fair amount of work and a fair amount of expense and so forth. And so this particular unit that they're showing here, this Gray's Robotics, I just wanted to show as an opportunity to show that they are moving forward, they are progressing, and this unit can mow many acres. It can mow for many hours without having to recharge. So I just wanted to use this to broach the topic of the progression of robotic mowers. And the article goes like this. And this is a commercial. I'm not getting paid for this. I don't know. The company could be great or horrible. I have no idea. And the same thing with the unit. But I'm just going to read through it to give you an idea how they're moving forward with robotics. Gray's Robotics has launched pre-orders for their flagship commercial-grade robotic lawnmower. Designed with efficiency and sustainability at its core, the new mower is compact with advancements to elevate the mowing experience. The new mower offers a suite of exceptional features, efficiency at its peak with a 60-inch wide mowing deck and the capability of mowing 1.6 acres every hour. Now, the smaller units, even the commercial-grade units, will mow a little bit less than 1.6 acres, but that's the max area. It's not per hour. It might take a smaller unit it might take it 2 or 3 days of mowing, 8 or 9 hours a day. But once it's cut down, those smaller units will keep it all cut down. It'll keep it nice and uniform, and it'll keep that area looking really nice with no input really at all. But that's the max area. This unit will do 1.6 acres every hour. Okay. So the idea eventually, when I was first introduced to these robotic mowers ages ago, the idea that they wanted to follow was they wanted to be able to have the landscaper or the operator show up to fertilize or spray the yard or whatever, drop off the mower, have the mower mow the lawn, and then spray the lawn and then pack it up and go. That's kind of where they wanted to go. I don't know if that's still their priority or not in the movement forward of these robotic mowers. But a mower like this wouldn't mow a home lawn, but it could the concept behind it, or the ability to drop it off and mow at that rate, 1.5 acres an hour, certainly moves it into the category of being able to show up with the unit, start it, have it start mowing. You're doing the trimming, you're doing the weed eating, you're doing the blow, whatever it is, spraying, and that thing's doing its job too, and then you pack it up and leave. So eventually, I think if there's still priority and they're still moving, resources to develop those units in that fashion, it's going to get there eventually. And this is certainly a mower that for football fields or soccer fields or fairways that could potentially do that. Extended operating time. The mower boosts an 8-hour run time. It can run for 8 hours without having to recharge. I'm not sure exactly how it recharges, but precision and adaptability. I don't know about so much about that. The terrain safety and connectivity. Gray's produce safety. Additional mowers come with an intuitive app, real time. Okay, that's just normal stuff. And then it's from the CEO. Today marks a pivotal moment for Gray's as we introduce G3, one of the most advanced robotic systems on the market today, says Logan Fahey, CEO of Gray's. We're excited and we believe. So he just goes on and talks more about the mower. But the only reason I wanted to show that is that if you're just a sprayer, and a fertilizer, this is an opportunity, or it will eventually be an opportunity that potentially you could use this as an upsell or an addition to diversify your business portfolio, to have mowers be able to, you can drop one off, it'll mow the lawn, you can go back the next day, pick it up, drop it off at another house, mow the lawn. You could potentially do that, not maybe with that particular unit, but that's the way it's moving. So keep that in mind as you see those robotics. Oh, it's $10,000 for a mower to mow these lawns or whatever. How much does it cost for a human being for you to hire someone to go out and do that? $7.25 an hour is the minimum, right? You're probably paying them $10 an hour. So just do the math real quick. I mean, that's $15,000-$20,000 a year to hire someone to do that. So you got to, figure out if that makes sense for your business or not. And if you are a business that's mowing, and particularly if you're even a golf course superintendent, where you have many units, you have to envision the benefit or the potential advantage here is that these mowers would be mowing all night long on your golf course. That's the way I use my unit on my house. Even at the research center, I would have them mow at night. I never actually saw any of the mowers, unless I was setting them up. I never actually saw any of the mowers running, ever. I just showed up every day and it was always cut. But you can't really do that with the past mowers on fairways unless you have multiple units. And so with units like this, or other units of other brands like this, that they can set up and do 1.5 acres an hour, you can set it up and you can do 2 or 3 fairways in one night, and then 2 or 3 fairways the next night. And so they're always cut, and they're running all night long when you guys are sleeping. So to keep that in mind as we move forward, is that the potential for a game-changing advancement in our industry is here, or on the very very edge of it, very verge of really being able to change the way in which we view and look at turfgrass management with these robotic mowers. Okay, that's all I want to talk about with that. Before I go any further, tomorrow is a guest author, but we'll be on at it's either 1 or 2. Let me look. He can't come on until, oh goodness, got it off my calendar now. I think it's 1 o'clock. I think he's coming on at 1 o'clock tomorrow. And tomorrow I have to look at my email. Let me look here. Well, I'll track it down, but I believe it's 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, PM Eastern time. Okay, so it's a little different time than we're used to. But that's the only time he could come on, and we're going to do a nice little short paper that tomorrow on Thatch as well. And then Wednesday night at 9 p.m. will be our normal time, what we've been doing, and then on Thursday morning will be normal. So this week's normal except for Tuesday afternoon. Okay, let's get into the article. So we've been talking about Thatch, and we've been setting up, the last couple of papers have been sort of setting up what is Thatch, how do we measure Thatch, sort of setting the background before we move into products that influence Thatch, or management practices that can influence Thatch, which we're going to get into tomorrow. Will be the first one tomorrow. So this one, this paper here is looking at potential problems by not managing Thatch. Okay, and the title is The Effect of Turfgrass Thatch on Water Infiltration Rates by Taylor and Blake in 1982. This was published in Soil Science Society of America journal. So one of our top journals. Okay. So the question becomes, why are we even concerned about Thatch? And I've talked about it briefly in terms of its, once it gets so dense, once the Thatch, what Thatch is, if we don't know, it's the intermingled living and dead tissue at the surface of the soil. And it becomes so thick because it consists of plant parts that are high in lignin, which is very difficult for microbes to decompose. And so if the decomposers are not decomposing that tissue, or they're decomposing it at a lower rate than it's being created, the tissue can continue to develop and create a thick layer of turf tissue at the soil surface. And because of that, if it gets dense enough, particularly on grasses that are extremely resistant to decay, like zoysia, it can create turf quality issues. One of those issues at the time in 1982 and before was thought to be water movement through that layer. Okay, we're applying irrigation. Is it causing problems in terms of water moisture penetration into the soil? So that's what this paper looks at. Let's go through the introduction. It's relatively short. I'm going to read most of it. Water infiltration rate is an important property for athletic turfgrass areas. So right here, we've been going over we've been going over home lawns and some golf. Well, this is a sport turf related sort of thing. There's golf on this as well, and lawn care, I believe, as well. Sporting events proceed in all types of weather, sometimes during or immediately following rain. If excess water is not quickly removed from the soil surface, the condition of the field deteriorates rapidly and affects the quality of play, increasing stress of the grass plants, and it increases the danger of compaction and puddling of soil. If you want to mess up a sport turf field, play on it after it's raining or when it's raining. You could probably, I don't know you could probably play 15 games on a normal dry field, and you play one game on a wet, muddy field, and it'll do much more damage on that one game on a rainy, wet field than it would do on 15, 20, who knows how many games. It takes no time at all to destroy a sport turf field when you're playing on it when it's saturated. That will destroy a turf grass field real quick. And they make that point right here. A low infiltration rate can also lead to poor water use efficiency with surface runoff when irrigation or rainfall rates are greater than the infiltration rate of the soil. Some investigators have suggested that a minimum infiltration rate of 1 inch an hour is desirable for most sport turf grass fields. Nowadays, that 1 inch an hour is, it's fine. If it's 1 inch an hour, it's probably not bad, but that's actually much higher. Most people will look to have infiltration rate greater than 1 inch an hour, closer to 4, 5, 6 inches an hour in some of these newer constructed root zones. Really, managing water is paramount, and it's the bottom of the pyramid. The most important component of turf management that we can manage is water, and too much water is a big problem on sport fields or any other turf grass. The water infiltration rate in an area can be dramatically affected by conditions at or near the soil surface. A soil crust, for example, can greatly reduce the infiltration rate even if the permeability of the underlying soil is high. Keene from 1969 reported that fine-textured wind-blown dust combined with plant residue to seal the surface of golf greens in Kansas. A buildup of thatch at the soil surface has been thought to interfere with soil aeration and water infiltration. So they have a couple citations here. Harris from 1978 suggested that a layer of thatch delays water entry into coarse textured turfgrass soils due to the thatch having finer pores than soil. Yeah, I don't know if I haven't read this Harris 78 paper, but I don't know how thatch could have finer pores than soil. That's a pretty steep claim. Oh, later research. Okay, well, here you go. Later research, however, indicates that the pores in the thatch are large. Okay, so this Hurto 1980 paper, I guess, refuted the 78 paper from Harris. Yeah, it'd be very difficult for me to be convinced that thatch is going to have a greater number of micropores than soil. That's a pretty steep claim. It's going to have a greater number of macropores than soils, unless you have a really odd soil. Consequently, any observed reduction in infiltration rate should not be attributed to pore sizes in thatch. Okay, so he clears it up. That's interesting how you mentioned that basically saying this guy said that, somebody else said something different and refuted it, and don't worry about it in the introduction. A better understanding of the effect of thatch on water infiltration would assist in improving the management practices used to control thatch, maintain high water infiltration rates, and supply water to grass plants on sport turf areas. The objective of the study was to determine if thatch acts as a limiting factor to water infiltration rate on coarse textured sports turf soils. So for those people who are in sport turf who get, very little love from the scientific community because there's not a lot of, well, there is today, but there wasn't a lot of research on sport turf related situations. Here's one just for you. The materials and methods. The effect of thatch on infiltration rate was measured using laboratory. So they're going to have two studies in this. One was a lab study looking at columns, and one was a field study. And I'm going to go through both of these briefly. Rate was measured using laboratory packed sand columns and field turf grass plots. In the laboratory experiment, infiltration rate into sand profiles was measured in the presence and absence of thatch layer at the surface. In the field experiment, 9 turfgrass areas were selected, and the sustained infiltration rate was measured with the thatch and soil surface in place and with the thatch and soil surface layer removed. So sums it up basically. Then he's going to go through and explain what they did. But they packed sand columns, and they either put thatch on it or didn't put thatch on it, and they compressed it with various amounts of pressure, and then measured the movement of water through. And they also did it in the field, where they measured the movement of water through turf grass in the field, and then they went in and removed the thatch layer and did it again. So they're going to explain briefly how they did that. Laboratory pack profiles consisted of sand packed into plexiglass cylinders of, looks like 3 inches in diameter by 2 feet in height, with a drainage outlet near the bottom. 20 centimeters of gravel, so that would be like 9 inches, I guess, something like that. 9 inches of gravel were placed in the cylinder and packed. Sand was then added in 2-inch increments. Each increment being packed with the energy of 5 impacts from, I'm not going to go through all that, it's just the logistics, but he's packing it. They're adding the sand to the columns in certain amount, in 2-inch increments, and they pack it, and they put a little bit more and pack it. And the reason they do that is they want the density, or the bulk density of the column to be set and known. So instead of just putting it all in the column and then compressing it, if they did that, the top layer of the soil packed column will be much more dense than the lower layer. So instead, knowing that, they attempt to avoid that by putting a little bit in and packing, and a little bit in and packing, and they pack it incrementally as they move up the column, which is very common, very appropriate way to do it. 6 treatments were imposed on these columns. Treatment 1 consisted of loosening the surface. Okay, I'm not going to read this. I'm just going to show the table up here. The table, there's treatment 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So treatment 5 is the control. So they just packed the sand and then didn't do nothing. They didn't do anything to the top. Treatment 6 is they had the sand loosened at the top, and they put peat on the top of the column. Okay. So 5 and 6 are sort of, the 5 is the control and 6 is like a secondary sort of, I don't know why they did peat, but they just did peat. The other 1, 2, 3, and 4 actually looked at thatch that they pulled from it was tall fescue. The thatch on the laboratory sand profile came from a turf roof garden established. Oh no, it was Kentucky bluegrass. Approximately 8 years previous. So they had a Kentucky bluegrass turf growing for 8 years on a roof. Thatch had developed to a depth of approximately 2 inches over the entire grass area. Thatch placed on the cylindrical sand profiles was 3 to 4 centimeters thick. So it was around 1 to 1.5 or 1 3/4 inch thick. So I would say between 1 and 2 inches thick, the thatch was, that they pulled from a rooftop sward of Kentucky bluegrass that had a well-developed thatch layer. So that's the thatch they used to put on top of the columns. So I'm going to try to explain this real briefly. Treatment 1 and 2, they packed the columns and they loosened the very top of the soil. Treatment 3 and 4, they packed the columns and they just didn't loosen the top of the soil. Okay, that's what this loosened versus packed means. They packed everything except for the very top part. They loosened it a little bit on treatments 1 and 2. And then on treatment 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, they put thatch on all those. The only difference is that they packed it in differently, the thatch differently. So they either just put a weight on it of a known mass, and on treatment 1 they just set the weight on there and let it compress down, or treatment 2 they just literally kind of hammered it in there with a known weight. They just packed it in with a certain amount of force, and that's what they did on 3 and 4 as well. So basically it's all packed on treatment on all the columns, and they just loosened the top of the soil on treatment 1 and 2, and they put sod on them and they just compressed it in different ways. And then treatment 3 and 4, that's all packed. They didn't loosen the soil at the top, and then they put thatch on it and compressed it in the same ways as 1 and 2. Okay? I'm not really sure why they came up with those exact methodologies, but that's how they did it. Okay. So that's how they did the laboratory study. The field study is, where's the field study? Okay. The effect of thatch on infiltration rate was determined on 9 field sites by measuring in situ infiltration rates, then removing the thatch and remeasuring the infiltration rate. The field turfgrass areas included 6 golf greens, 1 football field, and 2 turfgrass roof gardens, all of which had been constructed with soil mixtures having sand contents from 69 to 93% by weight. Okay, sustained infiltration rates were determined simultaneously in triplicate using a double ring infiltrometer. So if you've never seen a double ring infiltrometer, envision like trying to think how to explain it. Envision like a steel ring that's, say, 6 inches thick, 6 inches tall, and then, hang on one second. Let me put this on mute. Okay, there's nothing I can do about the sound in the background if you hear it. I got like I said, I got the gas people here. The plumbers are tearing up stuff down in my basement. Sorry about that. Okay, so basically, it's like a steel ring that is 4, 5, 6 inches tall, and then there's another ring outside that ring that is the same height. It's just a little bit wide. The diameter is much larger. So there's a center circle that's void, and then there's a ring that's void. And what they'll do is what we'll apply water into the middle ring, and when it penetrates through that middle ring, we're able to measure the rate in which the water is flowing through, and we can maintain a known amount of pressure on the top of that water column. Maybe I can find a photo of it, because it's kind of yeah, here's one, right? Well, that's a video. Oh, here's one. Let me see if I can pull this up so you can at least kind of know what I'm talking about. I don't know if this is going to pop up on the this or not. No. I'm not sure why that didn't pop up there. Let me try. I'm not exactly the most dexterous. Yeah, it's not gonna pop up now. Anyway, just envision two rings, and that's how we can actually accurately penetrate the soil and know how much water penetrated the soil in the field. Okay. Very common. Okay. Okay, so they used the double ring filtrometer. They measured the amount of water that's moving through with the turf and thatch on there on top of the soil in the field. And then the following day, the thatch layer was removed from inside the rings by slicing the grass into 20 centimeter strips and carefully cutting each strip just below the thatch layer using an 8 centimeter wide spatula. Generally, the amount removed included the surface 3 to 4 centimeters of thatch, and the soil infiltration rate was again measured, this time with the surface layer removed. So that's how they did it in the field. Pretty straightforward, pretty common. It's not anything out of the ordinary. So kudos to them. They did it right. So let's get into the results and discussion. The results show that thatch did not restrict the flow of water into the packed sand. So we're in the column study in the greenhouse, I guess is where they put it. So if you can envision a soil packed column with thatch stacked on top of it, and you go, well, if thatch is, thatch, if you believe, or at the time you were convinced that thatch was reducing the infiltration rate of water off the surface of the turf into the soil, they have a column study right here, and it says right at the beginning, the results show that thatch did not restrict the flow of water into the packed sand. Did not. So you have to think of this as, I don't have to, but envision like maybe like an artificial turf, like a plastic turf on top of sand. If you just poured water into that, I don't know, I guess that would depend on the way it is, but it's not necessarily, that's not going to restrict the water movement below. It's going to be the soil below it, because the artificial turf in that case has the sizes of the pores and the water moving through it. Well, I guess it's going to depend on the artificial turf. It's just going to go right through that. There's not going to be much restriction of that. But once it hits the soil, where the restriction is going to be, because the pore size of in this case, thatch is much larger than the pore size of the soil. Okay, and it's just going to go right through those large pores and hit the soil, and then it's going to start penetrating the soil at a different rate. However, if the sand surface was packed, there was no significant difference in infiltration rate between those cylinders with or without thatch. Nor was there a significant difference in infiltration from packing the thatch and firming it on the surface with a dead weight. Remember, they did it two different ways. They packed the thatch in two different methods. If the sand surface was loosened before the thatch was put in place, infiltration rates were higher even when the thatch was present than where the sand surface was not scarified. So when they loosened the soil a little bit at the top, the penetration was greater, faster than if they didn't, regardless of whether there was thatch on or not. So the thatch didn't really have much of an impact. Okay, in the lab. We're going to show a little bit of results here in a second. Actually, on that one, I can show it right now. So over here on the laboratory study, this graph here on the left, which is what we're looking at. So those of you listening, I'm looking at a bar graph. On the x-axis, we have treatment numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and on the y-axis, we have the infiltration rate of water in centimeters per hour. And you can see the sand packed with peat. So there was treatment number 6 had virtually, it was extremely low, 1 or 2 centimeters per hour. So that peat being more dense and much more hydrophobic allowed very little water to move through it. It was extremely slow. But all the other sand packed columns with thatch, or this one here without thatch, you can see the influence. The actual thatch, the presence of thatch in the greenhouse or the packed columns actually resulted in a little bit of an increase. We're looking at 100 centimeters per hour with the presence of thatch with loosely packed soil at the top, compared to maybe 50 or 60 centimeters per hour from the control. So the thatch actually resulted in a little bit of an increase in water movement from that particular treatment. And you can see it kind of goes down a little bit here and there, but most of them are very similar. Whether if it had thatch or if it didn't have thatch, for the most part, there was no reduction for sure. If anything, there was a little bit of an increase in water movement in the presence of thatch in the laboratory columns. Okay. Okay. I'm going to get to that in a second. So values of sustained infiltration rates with surface thatch present or removed are shown in figure 2. So this is for each of the 9 field studies. So in the field, in the laboratory information and results are very valuable, but sometimes they don't exactly correlate with what we see in the field. Okay, that happens very frequently, actually. In this case, they did both. I'm going to show what happened. I just showed you what happened in the laboratory. Now we're going to see what happens in the field. But in the field, in no case did infiltration rate increase significantly when the thatch layer was removed, thus supporting the laboratory data in showing that thatch does not limit water infiltration rate after reaching steady state infiltration. So the key word there is, key phrase is after reaching steady state infiltration. I'm going to show you what they mean by that in a second, okay? But once the infiltration becomes, movement is consistent and steady, the presence of thatch had no influence on that. It didn't reduce the infiltration rate. At 6 field locations, removal of the thatch layer did not significantly change infiltration. So 6 of the 9, there was no increase and there was no decrease. Okay. At 3 of the locations, removal of the surface significantly decreased the measured infiltration rate. Okay, so removal of thatch reduced the water flow. Okay, now they go through here and they postulate as to why it shouldn't happen. Okay, removal of the thatch shouldn't reduce the movement of water through the column. I mean, and theoretically, it shouldn't do that. And they provide some they postulate as to why that could occur, and basically they believe it's probably from an error in the methodology. 2 possible reasons for this are plugging of the pores by the spatula used to remove the surface layer. That's an error. It's nothing you can do about that. The second one was removal of the surface may have allowed air to be trapped in the soil pores, thus reducing both the conducting cross section and also the hydraulic gradient due to increasing air pressure below the wetting front. So basically, it's saying either one of these cases, either one, the spatula put soil there that clogged it up and prevented it, or it had like an airlock. Basically, that's the way they said it, and that's what they postulated. They don't know that. They just said that could be why it happened. It shouldn't really happen, but that could be possibly why it happened. Let's go up here and show you what I'm talking about. So in this figure here, for those listening, we're looking at the second figure here, and we're looking at a very similar graph as we did before. We have infiltration rate in centimeters per hour on the y-axis from 1 to 100 centimeters per hour. And we have the location. In this case, we're in the field. And the locations go from 1 to 9. And we have either the surface was present or the thatch was removed to 2 bar graphs. So if the thatch was removed, we don't see anything really happen one way or the other on 6 of the 9, remember? It was only treatments 1, 4, and 7 that actually showed a reduction. So this is what they're talking about. They're talking about a site 1. the reduction went from 2.5 centimeters down to 1.5 centimeters if you removed the thatch. In site 4, it went from 3 to 2, and in site 7, it went from 20 to 6-ish, something like that. So it was both biologically and statistically significant. You saw a reduction in the infiltration rate. You're slowing the movement of water in through the soil in the field when they removed the thatch. So whether or not it was actually as a result of the thatch or as a result of the methodology used to remove the thatch is irrelevant, because if you went in there and you removed that thatch in the same way they did, okay, well, they just basically cut it off, essentially. You wouldn't do that necessarily. But if you went and cut it off, like if you're a saw producer and you harvest it off, it's possible in these 3 situations that you're actually going to see water movement be slowed through the soil. That's what they found. Remember, 6 of the 9, they found nothing. 3 of the 9 they found. This is critical because oftentimes we don't show the misses. And this is extremely common in marketing and sales. They don't show the misses. They don't show everything that happened. They only show the part that they want to show you. They show you the hits, right? But in research and science, we tried our best to show you everything that happened. And in this case, they're telling you 6 of the 9, nothing happened. 3 of the 9, it actually reduced what the movement of water through there. So they're showing you everything and then letting you provide providing you the context and letting you understand, okay, well, it's possible if I'm a saw producer and I go strip this out, I might have some water infiltration problems. 3 of the 9 sites showed that, but it's 6 of the 9 that didn't show anything. So it's more likely that nothing's going to happen. Okay. If all they showed was one site, for example, if all they showed was site 7 and that's all they published, you might go, well, I can't go and remove the thatch because the water's not going to go through, Or if they showed just site 9, oh, nothing's going to happen. Don't worry about it, right? This is the reason why it's critical. This is turfgrass epistemology. How do we know what we know? And in this case, how do we know it's going to reduce the infiltration of water? We don't know. We just know that 3 of the 9 times it did. 6 of the 9 times it didn't. So we can kind of gauge we can use our logic to determine, okay, well, there's a pretty good chance it probably won't. Okay, but we don't know for sure. It could. Right? As opposed to showing just one site that did or just one site that didn't, that might be convincing. This is more valuable in my opinion because we're showing everything. Okay, we continue. We're getting down to the very end here. Although thatch did not restrict sustained water flow in either laboratory sand columns or field turfgrass areas, it did change the infiltration rate prior to reaching the sustained infiltration rate in the laboratory sand profiles. Okay, so we just said it didn't change anything once the water flow was sustained, but prior to that, it did. Prior to the water flow being sustained and consistent. So I don't know if I can get this on the screen or not. I can. Let's try to slide this over just a little bit if I can. Yeah, here we go. So I'm looking at a table, table 5, and the title of the table for those listening is Time Required for Water to Infiltrate into Sand Columns with and Without Thatch at the Surface in the Laboratory Prior to Establishment of Steady State Infiltration. Okay, so if you've ever done any water movement with like Tempe cells or, like little soil column cells, there's a saturated water flow and there's unsaturated water flow, and they're both very different. Okay. There's the physics involved behind that, which I'm not a soil physicist, but the physics behind unsaturated water flow are very different than the physics behind saturated water flow. We're talking about movement along soil colloids and soil particles at the surface rather than in the macropores in between the particles. Very different. And in this case, they're showing the table of what happened in terms of the amount of time to move the water through prior to the soil being saturated, essentially, a saturated movement of water straight through. There's no restriction in the bottom, but the soil is saturated and the water's moving through. Okay, prior to that, you have the time for 2 centimeters of water to infiltrate. So we have the first 2 centimeter increment, the second 2 centimeter increment, third and fourth and fifth, and so forth. Okay, so when the sand with no thatch at the surface, so it's just the sand on the columns, we see the time for it to infiltrate the 2 centimeters is 0.3 minutes. The second increment was 0.8 minutes, and then it goes to 1.1 and 1.38 and 1. I have these color coded here for a reason. I'll show that in a minute. But when the sand with moist thatch at the surface or sand with dried thatch at the surface was placed on top of the columns, the first 2 centimeters went from 0.3 minutes to requiring 4.5 minutes. When the thatch was dried, it required 6.5 minutes, basically. Okay, for the first 2 centimeters. When the second 2 centimeters was applied with moist thatch, it required 1.5 minutes versus 2.25 minutes. And then after that second application of water, the 2 centimeters of water, so roughly 2 inches or so. After 2 inches of water have been applied, and then the third 2 centimeters of water were applied, then you start to see the values, the time required for the water to penetrate the soil to be approximately equal to having no thatch at all, where you see 1.1 minutes versus 1.5, 1.6, 1.3 versus 1.6, 1.7, and so forth. So in other words, once the water penetrated the thatch and the thatch was completely moistened, and the water started to move into the soil, then it was consistent. But prior to that, it took a little time for that water to moisten the thatch, to saturate the thatch, and then to penetrate the soil. So it's very similar to like when you have pots at your house and you've gone on vacation and all those pots have dried out and they're full of like potting mix and they're dried out. You come back, your plants are wilted. To put water in those pots, a lot of the water is going to flow right off the top of the pot or penetrate around the pot and fall out the bottom of the pot. It's not going to penetrate that peat or that soil very, very easily because it's so hydrophobic. But after it's been moistened a little bit, then it's much more easy for that water to penetrate the peat or the potting mix in your house plants or your outside plants. It's much more easy once it's been moistened. Okay, that's the same thing that's going on here, where you have a hydrophobicity effect here on these initial times of having water move through the column. Once it's been saturated, then there's no problem. Okay, the movement of water through these columns is the exact same, regardless of whether there's peat or whether there's not peat. After the peat has been saturated is essentially what this table's saying. Okay. Okay. Last paragraph. The effect of thatch on the initial infiltration rate, although it lasted only for a short time period, should be taken into account in irrigation scheduling. Initially, very little water may enter the soil, but once the thatch is thoroughly wet, it will not result in a reduced rate of water infiltration into the soil. I wish they would have worded that a little bit lighter. Something like, once the thatch is thoroughly wet, we found no evidence that the thatch would result in reductions in water penetration or something like that. When you say it will not result in reduced rate, to me, that's a little too forceful because, it won't result in a reduced rate anywhere in the world at any time for any reason. And once it's wet, it doesn't leave any room for our mistakes, which we know we make many of, right? So that's one concern, at least in this particular paper, that's been minimized is the moisture, the water movement through the soil. There may be a delay in an initial runoff effect if the thatch and the turf grass was allowed to dry out, and then you went and started applying water. There may be some water movement influence then. But once the thatch is moistened, the movement of water according to this paper, wouldn't be restricted as a result of the thatch, either in the greenhouse or in the field. Okay. Now, having said all that, we're going to go through thatch in the next couple of papers as well, or next couple of weeks. And you're going to find that the thatch literature is diverse and variable, meaning some papers will show thatch doesn't really do anything. Other papers will show thatch is detrimental to turfgrass quality. Some papers will show these sugars don't do anything to thatch reduction. Other papers will show they do. Okay. Some will show top dressing doesn't do anything. Some show top dressing will do something. Aerification doesn't do anything. Aerification sometimes reduces it. So it is a vast wasteland of conflicting information. Oh, not so much conflicting, but just variable information. We have to look at each, and with thatch, we have to look at each location very specifically and see the variables as best we can so that we can make our best educated decision. Is thatch resulting in a reduction in turfgrass quality or not? Right? What turf grass is the thatch being developed from? Is it zoysia grass or is it Kentucky bluegrass? Where is it? Is it in Wisconsin or is it in South Florida? Or is it in California or in Bulgaria or Germany, wherever you guys are, right? The environmental conditions where it is are going to greatly affect the development of thatch. How? Because in colder climates, where the microbes don't have the ability to reduce that thatch or break it down as rapidly as it would in warmer climates, you might have a propensity or a greater likelihood of developing more thatch. So what might work in Dallas, Texas on thatch reduction might not work in, West Lafayette, Indiana in Purdue. So it just simply because of the differences in the climates and the cold temperatures and the rainfall and microbial activity that we need to break that thatch down. Okay, so keep that in mind as we move through here. Please don't take one paper. You can do this for the most part in some of the nitrogen papers where you can take one paper and kind of it'll help guide you oftentimes. Nitrogen rate should be, whatever, half a pound to 2 pounds or whatever on this turf grass. You can kind of use that wherever, sort of, right? But in thatch, you can't do that. You can't say, I'm going to apply this product and it's going to reduce my thatch by 30% because this paper said so. It's not that simple. I can top dress and aerify, and if this paper said I should do it, or it's this paper and identified that it's a valid management program for reducing thatch, and therefore I'm going to do it in Hawaii when it was done in Washington State. Okay, so it is definitely, thatch is definitely a factor in turfgrass management that you cannot say one size fits all. We have to look at the entire body of literature and get an understanding of what's going on so we can make the best management decision we have. And in most cases, I'll just say this from the beginning, in most cases, it's going to be a physical solution. It's going to be something physical to remove that tissue out. It's going to be the management plan that is the most consistent across locations and times and turf grasses. It's not going to be a product or a chemical that you can apply that's going to, have a beneficial impact on your location. In most cases, there are clearly cases to the contrary, but keep that in mind as we move forward. Okay, guys. Okay, tomorrow, I'm going to put it up this afternoon, the time. I'm pretty sure it's at 1 p.m. tomorrow. We have a guest, and we're going to talk about some of those products. So there's a biological product that he did that he worked on and he published in his paper. It's a very short paper about turfgrass thatch management with biological products, or one or two biological products, if I remember correctly from his paper. Okay, guys. If there's no questions, thank you all for showing up. Looney, Tay Ronk. I'm not sure if I remember that name, Tay Ronk. I'm sorry if you've been on here before and I just forgot, but a couple new names. That popping up, Brady 419. Interesting name. From Germany to Bulgaria to California to New England, wherever you're at. Thanks for showing up. I really appreciate you showing up. Now, there was one thing that popped up on Discord as I leave you today. I didn't realize on Discord there's like a musical category, and somebody mentioned something about the music that I played last time. So I'm popping in another new musical ending here. This is almost for sure going to get my video stripped off of YouTube because there's probably a copyright on it. But I will say this: for many, many years, I've been disappointed in the quality of rock music, but there may be hope. There is hope yet. The hope comes in the form of 3 ladies from Mexico. See you tomorrow. Bye.